All right, good evening, everybody. It is time for another live edition of the Alaska Airmen's Association and our Government Affairs Update. My name's Adam White, and I am wearing another Hawaiian shirt this time after all the comments I received last time, and a lot of emails and text messages after the fact, and so decided to go ahead and continue the trend a little bit by request from a few of you. Summer has arrived officially, not necessarily by the calendar, but most of you know that I do not live in Anchorage. I live north of the Alaska Range in a little small community called Nenana. There's about 400 of us here when we are all at home. But one of the things Nenana is very famous for is a tripod that we set out on the river and attach a cable and a clock to it. And basically people guess as to when the ice is going to break up on the river. Well, the river went out last Monday, and so it's officially summer. The robins, actually, I saw 5 or 6 robins dancing around outside chasing bugs. I've killed several mosquitoes already, and so summer is definitely here in Alaska. You can tell by the one airplane behind me, the mall. I typically have that on floats. I will put that on floats here in another week or two. The other airplane I fly and operate is a Cessna 206. It's being worked on right now. It's down for its annual inspection. Was able to finally travel around enough to get that down to the folks that do that annual inspection for me. And so that should be back here in a couple weeks. And until I get the 206 back, I'm going to keep them all on wheels. That way I can still go out and do what I need to get done in my other jobs that are not with the Alaska Airmen's Association. So I wanted to take some time tonight, first of all, to say that last weekend was really sad. That's the first time since I can remember that the first weekend in May, I was not in Anchorage at the Great Alaska Aviation Gathering. And so if you missed the raffle, that was done over social media. Some rules about how we had to do some of that. It's a long drawn-out story, don't need to go into all the details. But we've announced the winner of the airplane and all the other prizes. If you want to find out about that, that means you didn't win because all the winners have already been contacted, so apologize for that. But the winner of the airplane is from North Dakota. Great fella. He's all excited, as you can imagine. He bought 30 tickets. So some of you have reached out to me and kind of jokingly complained that, hey, wait a minute, you didn't pull my ticket again this year. What's up? Well, you got to up your game a little bit. 30 tickets is a little hard to beat. So anyway, that fella is obviously very excited. Very good event to be able to pull those tickets and have all those things sitting there. So I encourage you to go back and watch that video. There was some audio trouble, but we've been able to get some of that cleaned up with the video that we've posted online. But if you watch that, just know that some of that audio was messed up, but we were able to fix some of it later. So obviously, a long list of folks that we want to say thank you to, and probably the biggest is all of you who bought tickets. That is what funds a lot of the things that we do as an Alaska Airmen's Association. That's what helps pay my salary for the part-time work that I do for the association when it comes to government affairs, so thank you for that. Obviously, we wouldn't have an airplane to raffle off if we didn't have all the other supporters going for all their sponsorships and all the materials and parts and supplies and all of that. So I'm not even going to try to go down that whole long list of folks because there's a lot of them and I know I'm going to forget a few of them. So I encourage you to go back and look at that event that we had on Sunday and be able to see all that. One of the things that you can do though, every year at the gathering we have a program. I remember I didn't get to go to very many Major League Baseball games growing up as a kid because it was just so far away from where I grew up. But I do remember the guys walking up and down the stands, hollering, programs, can't tell the players without a program. That still sticks in my head. But anyway, the program that we have for the gathering is always a good resource. A lot of good advertisements in there, a lot of good articles, and things about the show. Obviously the floor plan and the map, which, this year is not really that important since we didn't actually have it in person. But that program is still available. Alaska Skyways Magazine has partnered with the Alaska Airmen's Association, and there's a digital copy of that program that still has all that great resource that you've come to know and love is still available. So I encourage you to go to alaskaSkywaysMag.com. I'm pretty sure I got that right, alaskaSkywaysMag.com, and be able to download that free program, digital copy of that program from the trade show, so you can still have access to a lot of the benefits of that. Actually, a lot of the vendors are still offering some show specials. So a big shout out to those folks. I appreciate your efforts to still give discounts to our members, even though we weren't able to meet in person this year. So again, that's alaskaSkywaysMag.com, where you can go and get that copy of that digital program guide. So a couple of things I want to talk about tonight. We're still dealing with health mandates here in the state. We're still dealing with the virus. I want to say that we've done a pretty good job as a state as a whole of flattening that curve. We keep hearing that phrase. Some of us may be getting a little tired of listening to the governor and Dr. Zink and Adam Crum and those guys every day talking about that virus. But we've still been able to get out and fly. We've still been able to go out and do things while we maintain social distancing, while we still follow those health mandates. We are still able to get out and enjoy aviation. The problem is we haven't been able to get out and do it as much as we normally would. And so there's a lot of recency and currency and expiration problems that we're having with a wide range of rules within the FAA. So if you remember from a couple of these events back and forth, I've been talking about what we've been doing as an association to interface with the FAA and ask them, hey, we really need some guidance on what we're going to do about XYZ. The FAA, to their credit, has been working on that. They've been trying really hard to come up with some solutions and some answers. But it's one of those deals where you kind of have to put out the biggest fire first and try to manage and triage all the things that are happening here with aviation. So early on, the priority was on the air carriers, was on the 121 operators, the big airlines, and on air traffic control and how we can keep our aviation system up and running. And while they didn't ignore us, they just couldn't get to it right away. They promised us they were working on it. It wasn't just the Alaska Airmen's, AOPA, our big brother and sisters back on the East Coast, EAA, and the National Business Aircraft Association, several others had been writing to and calling and emailing the FAA asking basically the same kinds of questions. And so the FAA did something pretty unusual, actually. They came out with a special rule. It's a special FAR, and I want to say special VFR. I can kind of tell you what my mind is thinking. I want to get out and go flying. But a special FAR that bypassed the comment period, that bypassed the public process. Normally we would have a problem with that. We wouldn't want a rule to come out that we didn't have any input in, that we didn't have a way to go back and read before it was released and have some back and forth with the FAA and say, yeah, but what about this? Can we change that? That did not happen. The FAA wanted to get this rulemaking out fast. They knew time was of the essence. They were aware that people were wanting this information and that people were in limbo. We had medical certificates that were expiring. We had biannual flight reviews that were expiring. We had flight instructor certificates expiring. At the end of March, inspection authorization for mechanics expired. All these long list of things were expiring. Instrument proficiency, that whole 6-month time, all that was expiring, and the FAA wanted to get these rules out there pretty quick. So what they did is they came out and they worked through all those things, and may have some interference there. I got a buddy that just taxied up. He's been out enjoying this evening, and so if you hear an airplane, love the sound of an airplane, especially an old Aeronica Chief, which is what that is. So anyway, the FAA came out with a special rule. And here it is, 94 pages. I had to print it off and start marking it up and reading through it. And I'll admit, I am not an expert on this. I have tried to read it and tried to understand it. I've got the high points, but there's still a lot of things that I'm sorting through right now to find out. Just quickly to answer, yes, that is a mall behind me. That's an M7 235B, to answer that question that just popped up on Instagram. But reading through this special rule, and I've had a lot of people asking me, what about this, what about that? So I'm going to go through some of the most often asked things that I have received about this special rule and what it briefly means. I'm not going to be able to cover all of it. People don't want to sit here for 2 hours as I talk about the 94-page special Federal Aviation Regulation. So if I don't answer your question here, go ahead and type it in. I'm trying to keep up with what's happening here on Facebook and on Instagram. I'll try my best to answer it here. If not, send me an email, and I will be glad to answer it in an email and help you find the answer you're looking for. But first of all, we'll start off with medicals, because that's been the most asked question that I've received. What do I do about my medical? It expired. Can I still go flying? What does that look like? Well, so from March through May, the FAA says that you're basically good until the end of June 30th. So that's a very quick, short version of the answer, but that's the gist of it. So if your medical expired anywhere between March through the end of May, you're good all the way through the end of June. Now, obviously, if your medical expires in June, it still expires at the end of June. If it expires in July, same deal. You've got till the end of July to take care of that. So and that seems to be a common thread with a lot of this, is a 3-month extension for a lot of these. But it's not a simple 3-month extension, because when we look at the biannual flight review, there's a 3 calendar month extension that applies to pilots who were current to act as pilot in command in March 2020 and whose flight review was due in March 2020 through June of 2020. So basically, if you were current, your biannual flight review has been extended basically 3 months. But there's some things that are added to it. And I'm going to quickly I took some notes here, so apologize for trying to read some of these, but this way I want to make sure that I get the correct information out there. The last thing we want to do is tell you something that's not right. So you must have logged at least 10 hours of pilot in command time within the past 12 calendar months preceding the month the flight review was due. This flight time must be obtained in an aircraft for which the pilot is rated. In addition, eligible pilots will need to complete the FAA Safety Team online courses totaling at least 3 wings credits. And if you don't know what those are, you remember in some of the other live events, I've encouraged you to go online and take some of those online safety courses. That's what the FAA is talking about. You need to have done 3 of those since January of 2020. So anything that you did before that doesn't count towards this 3-month extension for your biannual. But you can go online and do 3 of those safety courses on the Wings program, and that will also be a part of being able to extend your biannual flight review through the end of June. So just ironically, the flight instructor certificate's pretty much the same thing, March, April, or May, or June. It goes all the way up to June 30th for your flight instructor renewals. Now, one thing, if you're not a flight instructor, just as a general rule, all the flight instructors out there already know this, but your flight instructor certificate actually expires. Your pilot certificate doesn't expire, you're just no longer current. Flight instructor certificate expires. And if you do not renew it and you want to get it back, you got to go back through all those check rides again. Trust me, you don't want your CFI to expire. Ironically, my CFI and my biannual flight review expire in July of this year. So I've started an online flight instructor renewal course and working through that and talking with another buddy of mine who's a flight instructor, and we basically check each other out and do our own biannual flight reviews for each other. And you would think that friends flying with each other, doing a buddy VFR, that it would be easy. We respect each other enough that we make it pretty hard on each other because we don't want to have bad habits that we've picked up. And so anyway, that's a little bit of a rabbit trail. But that's what is happening for me personally. I've got to get everything done before the end of July because that's when I expire. So basically the CFI has been extended till the end of June this year. So there is some other things that go along with that. The FAA is talking about, because you can renew your flight instructor certificate besides just taking on an online course. If you've signed off enough people for check rods and they've passed, there's other things that may be difficult to accomplish during this time frame. And so if you want more information about that, I can fill you in offline. So the instrument proficiency check. You know, not very many people here in Alaska that fly recreationally keep their instrument currency. A lot of folks have their instrument ticket, but they just don't fly on instruments enough to keep it current. Some of us, myself included, try to stay proficient, try to stay current. One of the things that I've implemented in my own flying is that whenever possible, I will shoot a practice approach here into my home airport, whether it's in VFR conditions or whether or not I go ahead and talk to approach and actually get a full-on clearance and do that. I still fly that procedure. Now, that doesn't mean that every time I do that, I can count it because I did not have a view limiting device or was in actual instrument conditions, but it still helps with that proficiency. You know, there's a difference between currency and proficiency. I think we all know that and understand that. And many years ago, the FAA changed it from instrument currency to instrument proficiency is what we're trying for. Basically, to be eligible for the relief for an instrument proficiency check, which by the way is an additional 3 calendar months they're adding, but in order to get that, you had to have logged in the 6 calendar months 3 instrument approaches in actual weather conditions or under simulated conditions using a view limiting device. So instead of 6 of those every 6 months, if you've done 3 in the past 6 months, you can extend another 3 months. So that basically makes the instrument proficiency period 9 months right now instead of 6. There's a couple of other caveats for some of that, but the big part of it is pretty much with all of these, the extensions have gone all the way out to the end of June. Now, what do we do when we get to June 30th and the world has not gotten back to normal? That's a good question. I'm not sure, and I don't know that the FAA knows the answer to that fully right now. It's obvious from what we've read in this 94 pages here that the FAA thinks the world's going to be back to normal enough that we can continue on by the end of June. So that's my hope, that's my prayer, that things will be better by that point and we can go on about our life as close to what normal used to be. And I say it that way because I'm not sure what the new normal will be. But the FAA thinks that this 3-month extension on all of these is enough to get us through this next little hurdle. So obviously I'm going to be keeping in touch with the FAA. We're going to go through and look and see what we can do to figure out what happens June 30th or actually July 1st if we can't get this stuff done in the meantime. So I did get a question from a friend of mine in Fairbanks that says, what do we do about these extensions with our insurance company? Is the insurance company going to accept these extensions even though when you look in your logbook, normally you would be expired? That's a good question, and I don't have an answer for every insurance broker out there because there's so many of them that I can't give you an answer for all those, and I wouldn't want to go out on a limb that far. So what I will encourage you to do is to contact your insurance broker and ask them that question. My guess is that probably will be different for a few things here. I've heard that some of the insurance companies are saying, we don't care if the FAA is giving you an extension on your medical. You're not going to have coverage if you fly without a medical, even though the FAA says, you know, we're okay and we've extended it 3 months. So that may have changed with some of this because this is actually a little bit different than what came out initially with medicals. Medicals, they were just going to kind of look the other way and not take enforcement action. Now they've actually extended it. So got a question here about flight reviews. Can't come back to the U.S. because of the quarantine. On November, I have to make a flight review, but don't know if I'll be in the U.S. Yeah, that's a good question. So my guess is that if you can't find a U.S. certified flight instructor there in Argentina that can give you a biannual flight review, you are probably going to want to reach out to the FAA and ask them that question. Fly Bastion, if you want to send me an email or a private message with some contact information, I'll be glad to help you find somebody in the FAA who can answer that question directly for you. But back to the insurance questions here. So, most insurance providers want you to have currency and proficiency. Your biannual flight review has to be within the time frame. So my suspicion, and that's all it is, I can't speak for the insurance brokers, but since we have a special federal aviation regulation that has given us an extension through the end of June for these, technically, according to the FAA, you are in compliance. You still have a current biannual flight review. You still have a current medical. You still have a current instrument proficiency check inside that window. You're still a current CFI. So that would be my assumption. That would be the way I would argue and talk to my insurance broker when I ask them that question, is that this is a different scenario than what we had just a couple of weeks ago. This is not a, we're going to look the other way. This is a, honest to goodness, we've changed the rules, and took them 94 pages to do it. But there's a lot of other things they talk about in here, a lot of second in command, a lot of 141 flight schools, and all that. So speaking of flight schools and check rides and all that, I am still hearing that check rides are on hold for most of the country. Matter of fact, I have not heard of any place that is currently giving check rides in the U.S. right now. A good friend of mine is in Kansas, who lives here in Alaska, went to Kansas to get his private pilot certificate, and not sure if he's going to be able to take his check ride, and wondering, what does he do? Does he stay down there thinking he can get it, or does he come home and then have the 14-day self-isolation here in Alaska when he comes back home, hoping that maybe he can take a check ride here in Alaska? A lot of uncertainty right now when it comes to check rides. But there is some extensions on your written exams and all that, and if you want more information about it, I can help you answer that a little bit later. But probably the easiest thing to do would be to go online to the FAA's website and type in COVID relief, and you can find this 94-page special FAR, and it's a PDF, and you can do a word search in there, and that's how I've been able to find places. Trying to thumb through this 94 pages right now to find you an answer is a little difficult. I can type some things in here and find some things pretty quick, but so that's the really high spots, the flight level view of what we've got in this special federal aviation regulation. Real quick, I want to talk about a couple of other things that folks are concerned about. Just this afternoon, the Missile Defense Agency released their final environmental assessment, their proposed final environmental assessment for the CLEAR LRDR, the Long Range Discriminating Radar, which is here in the interior of Alaska that they're building. It's going to change the airspace. We're going to have a temporary flight restriction over that facility during their testing. It's going to look pretty close to what the final airspace proposal looks like. But they just issued their proposed final environmental assessment today. There's a comment period that ends on June 2nd about that temporary flight restriction, and I will post some information about that on our social media so you can go and look at that document. It probably won't be up until tomorrow morning for you to go and look at that. I did have some folks call me that had seen the official announcement in the papers about that, and so it is up and it is out with that environmental assessment, and so we will have an opportunity to comment on that. Some good news though, different topic. There's more money coming to the state of Alaska from the FAA. You may have read in the paper that the Airport Improvement Program, and with some supplemental grants, there's another $102 million coming to help aviation here in the state. And just quickly going through some of the things that were approved from those airport improvement projects. Bethel's going to get some runway enhancements. They're going to be able to strengthen the base of that runway so it can handle heavier aircraft. Crooked Creek, going to construct an access road and an apron and reconstruct the runway. Fairbanks International is going to get some snow removal equipment to the tune of $1.4 million. So that's going to be a lot of snow blowers and plows and other things. Just quickly looking down the list, Cordova, Nome, Juneau, Anchorage, Palmer, Barrow. Going to be some runway rehabilitation, updating some master plans, construct an aircraft rescue and firefighting building. So those are the types of things that are going to be approved for these $102 million that is coming to the state of Alaska, in addition to the COVID relief money that came to the airports. And so I've had a lot of conversations with folks within DOT as to what's going to happen with that money. We all know things in Juneau are not actually running very smooth. And so there's been some political back and forth, some angling to figure out how that's going to work. The legislators are trying to figure out how they can meet and still comply with the health mandates, with social distancing. But the legislators are wanting to vote whether or not to accept the federal funds before anybody spends it. There's some discussion as to who has the authority to determine how it's going to get spent. There's discussion as to whether or not we can accept all of it or some of it and all that. And everybody's starting to use it for their own political purposes, and that's really frustrating, to be honest with you. The FAA was very specific as to what they wanted that money to be used for, what it was allowed to be used for. So that conversation's already happened. There is no point in getting into a big heated debate politically as to what we can use that money for. The FAA has already said what that money's for. We just need to be able to get access to it and to get things rolling here. So those were the big topics I wanted to talk about tonight. And so I appreciate everybody tuning in for that. Good to see folks not just here in Alaska, but actually we got folks from all over the world checking in and waving and saying hello. So it's good to have all of you joining us tonight. Just real quick, want to see if there's any questions I can answer before we sign off. I am pretty easily available. If you go to alaskaairmen.org, you'll see my contact information. My phone number is listed there, as well as my email address. And love to hear from members. I appreciate your membership in normal times, and I keep saying the word normal, but I'm not sure what that is anymore. Or even what that was. It's been so long, it seems. But I do appreciate your membership. When I go and I talk to government officials, it's not just Adam White who's there talking, and they know that. They know that I've got 2,000 people standing behind me that I'm representing. And so thank you for those 2,000 folks out there that are members of the Alaska Airmen's Association. If you're not a member, what are you waiting for? You need to be a member, not just because it helps fund what we are doing here in Alaska, but it also helps, actually we're involved in national issues and even international issues. And so your voice added to the 2,000 others makes us stronger, makes us more of a force to be listened to. We don't wield that force unnecessarily. We try to be very respectful when we go to those in authority and government, knowing that they have a tough job sometimes to actually figure out what to do and how to come up with rules and regulations. But they do value our input. They want to know how their decisions impact those of us that are out actually doing the things that they make rules about. So please become a member if you're not. Our website has all kinds of ways to be able to do that. And again, the folks in the office are going to be busy for the next day or two, I know, because people are going to start calling to become members. So I appreciate that. Especially during this time where we were not able to have that Great Alaska Aviation Gathering. Our budget's pretty tight. Just going to be frank and honest with you. Not having that gathering put a big strain on our budget. Thankfully, the raffle, the tickets sold out, and that was great to have that happen. Still makes the budget tight. So we need memberships, not just for the income, but it adds to our voice and makes us more effective. So appreciate your involvement. Again, feel free to reach out to me. Again, with my email is adamwhite@alaskaairmen.org, and then other contact information are available on the website. Feel free to private message through social media. I'll be able to get those and be able to respond to you. So appreciate everybody being involved. Let's see. I want to make sure I'm not missing anything. As we are seeing folks popping up from all over, again, all over the world. It's neat to see that. So that's about all I had. I don't want to keep people hanging on too much longer, but again, wearing another Hawaiian shirt, got a lot of comments the last time about that, and so wanted to kind of keep that going and keep that, keep our spirits high. We may not be able to get out and do the things that we typically would be doing, but stiff upper lip and all those kinds of things. So again, good to see some of you checking in. Thanks for being here, and write or email or call me if you've got any more questions. We'll see you next time.